think it's price resistance now. We're hitting a glass ceiling where people are saying it's too expensive to go out to eat. I won't celebrate that birthday outside my home. I'll stay in.
Mm-hmm. You said some years ago, Booking.com caught us all sleepwalking and walked into our industry and then sold our customers back to you.
Probably in the days when I first started in hotels, any occupancy above 65, 66% was considered good. These days, anything less than 76% is considered bad. Age-appropriate models.
Yeah, exactly. But you've just succinctly put in 3 words what I've tried to say in about 3 minutes. So thank you, Robin. Okay, a very warm welcome to everybody. Welcome to the Hotel Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Hamadash from DHM, and I'm absolutely delighted to have an old friend of mine, Robin Sheppard, the president of Bespoke Hotels. Robin, you've been running the company for over 25 years now, and you're obviously keeping very busy still because you've still got another 6 hotels to open in 2025. You've got such a wealth of experience in the industry. I'm really excited to get into things. So first of all, how are you, Robin? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm delighted to join you, Adam. I'm in good form, all things considered. The doctors don't trouble me too often, but they like to see me for regular checkups. But that's part of getting old, I suppose. But all things considered, I'm tip-top.
Good, fantastic. Well, very pleased to hear it. So I thought what we'd do is, you're obviously very well known within the industry. Every time we meet, I say hello, and then somebody's sort of trying to grab your attention. But for those that perhaps don't know you, Robin, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your experience in this wonderful industry we call home.
By the way, they're all creditors.
That's why then.
Well, I'm astonished to say that I'm celebrating 50 years in the hotel business this winter.
Amazing.
I got the bug at school when I was a very young boy doing holiday jobs, and went off to college to study at what was Oxford Poly, is now Oxford Brookes, and then joined something called British Transport Hotels, which in those days was a collection of some stunning buildings near train stations, plus some exceptions like Gleneagles, which is a very special hotel even then. So I had a very good grounding, and I was very fortunate to work in some beautiful parts of the country, and also had some educational visits. Like my first appointment out of college was in the Adelphi Hotel in Liverpool. You can imagine a very timid southerner suddenly appears in the pool and learns street culture pretty quickly. So it was fascinating to see, traveling the country, how that would change. And I suppose Bespoke reflects that experience of being able to explore the UK. So we have hotels from south tip of Cornwall to the north of Scotland, and we're very grateful for that diversity.
Fantastic, and let's pick up a little bit about the growth of Bespoke Hotels, because you're often cited in the trade press having acquired new properties, and I know you've had a relatively aggressive growth plan over the last few years. In fact, as you mentioned, as I mentioned, you mentioned to me previously that 6 hotels are opening in 2025. Is it a good market at the moment to be acquiring hotels and growing them?
If you're careful and you select the right asset, it's still a good time to buy. But the general correction in the marketplace that everybody was predicting 3 years ago when we were coming out of COVID hasn't happened. There's perhaps a slow puncture in terms of people's preparedness to spend the asking price, and owners' reluctance to drop that asking price hasn't quite met in the middle. So we don't seem to have had a huge number of deals by comparison with other periods in our existence. But we're an unusual company in that over 25 years we've tended to fill our boots most when it's recessionary or difficult, turbulent times, and the smoother, more stable times tends to reflect that in that the number of hotels we operate stays broadly the same. But growth comes through difficulty. And long may that continue. I'm not wishing a recession upon anybody, but I do expect to see some sort of churn over the next year or so, even if only to keep the property agents busy. It's been a very strange time as we came out of COVID, because we went from 0 to 100 miles an hour in no time, and we seem to cause all sorts of troubles to the supply chain in the process, the labour market.
Yeah.
Anything that was by the coast or in the bucolic countryside was trading its socks off, and 100% occupancy,
Mm.
lack of staff to be able to facilitate. So it was a real shock. And of course, we all signed up to C-bills at the time, which meant that we borrowed a lot of money from what we thought was a 2% from the government.
Mm.
Of course, it's considerably higher than that now.
Yeah.
But it's been a strange time, I must say. But hopefully, with a change of government, we'll see some calm and some lack of chaos.
Yes.
I'm not turning this into a political broadcast, but I do think having so many ministers responsible for so many things for such a short space of time,
Mm.
the Tories were in control, didn't help any business people to make decisions.
Yeah. Well, I think I read something the other day that I forget which area of government it was, but it might have been transport. But there was something like 12 ministers in 11 years in one particular sector. I mean, how can anyone get any sort of level of work done when there's that much change?
Well, you can't, and of course, you can't become an authority in that subject unless you have a period of bedding in and learning,
Yeah.
unless you're super bright. So it's been a very disappointing period, and perhaps the public's respect for politicians has crashed at the same time. So
Yeah.
the Labour Party have got to go some in order to regain confidence, not just in themselves, but also politics generally.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I mean, you Robin, you touched on a few challenges there. Where do you see that the biggest challenges are in the sort of, let's say, 12 months ahead for the hotel industry? Is it the staffing challenges? Is it more sort of cost of doing business? Those two tend to be the most cited from the conversations I've had recently. What do you think?
I think it's price resistance now. We're hitting a glass ceiling where people are saying it's too expensive to go out to eat. I won't celebrate that birthday outside my home. I'll stay in.
Mm-hmm.
People are becoming a little bit more circumspect about how often they go out and celebrate. So certainly from a food and beverage point of view, that's been the biggest barrier. That suddenly see how much for a piece of fish, and what is a perfectly normal markup that any sustainable restaurant would expect to achieve just is too much now for people. So we've seen a huge decline in the high street for restaurants. A lot of really skilled and capable restaurateurs and chefs just handing the keys back and saying, I can't run this business any longer.
Yeah.
So hotels that have food and beverage will say, well, we're doing fine with rooms, but a lot of them will not particularly want to step forward and say it's been really tough to trade in the food and beverage market, but it has. Of course, there are exceptions that break the rule where someone comes up with something really cool or very, very special. And you can cite that as an example, but they're increasingly rare.
Yeah.
Simon Wood is a past winner of MasterChef, for instance, terrifically talented chef, team, and worked incredibly hard. He's just handed the keys back on his eponymous Wood restaurant in Manchester. And you think, well, what's the world coming to if someone like him, with all that oomph and drive, can't make it work?
Yeah.
So unless there is a manifest change in raw ingredients, oil prices, and energy bills, I see hotels, particularly restaurant parts of hotels, struggling to get through over the next 18 months.
So with that in mind, do you, in my last episode with Adrian Ellis, we talked about the rise of apart hotel concepts, which is, fundamentally a much leaner model for hotels, but very often not having any sort of facility for breakfast and dinner. So effectively, cut out all of the F&B and all the associated costs that go with it. Do you see more hotels trying to operate, perhaps not in the apart hotel concept, but in some sort of more leaner fashion, so that they just do the B and B, or maybe just the B?
Well, beautifully put. I do see just that. I see existing bed stock continuing to sell itself, but with minimum staff and bells and whistles, and food and beverage acts where you might have two restaurants in a hotel or restaurant set up, then the only one will survive. Quite often the menu will not be offered on a Monday or a Tuesday because the staff are off. So a 7-day-a-week operation is now 5 days or less. And certainly, if I looked at the most robust part of our business, across all the properties we run, we have a number of service department components in our business.
Hmm.
And those are the ones that seem to be riding the storm the easiest. And certainly, if
Yeah.
we could reinvent all our hotel stock as service departments, I think we'd be sitting here with a Chinese grin on our faces.
Yes. So that's interesting, because that certainly is reflective of what I'm hearing and seeing. Certainly, we work with a number of different service departments and apart hotel brands, and the business seems to be very good. That obviously is not necessarily achievable for every property, especially if you're in a more of a rural setting and perhaps a more traditional sort of country house hotel, of which I know that sort of brief description fits the bill for many of the properties as part of the bespoke portfolio. Do you see there's any way of doing it for those more rural properties, or is it just kind of, well, we need the restaurant to actually get them here?
A number of our properties are north of the border, where we have a great deal of strength in terms of demand from the US.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stateside customers coming back to find their ancestral trail.
Yeah, nice.
And the Isle of Skye is always an incredibly popular destination. So West Scotland seems to have its own bubble around it. And we're thrilled and delighted to be competing in Scotland, because it seems to be defying gravity in terms of both food and beverage and
Mm-hmm.
rooms. But further south, it is more difficult, unless you're in Edinburgh,
Mm-hmm.
which seems to be the hottest ticket in Europe at the moment in terms of trade.
Yeah.
But elsewhere, yes, it has been quite tough. And then, of course, the other sort of hidden issues like staff recruitment and retention become issues for you as well. So whilst you might have a food and beverage product which is delightful and enchanting, you may not have enough staff to be able to open up to the number of covers you'd really like to be servicing. So you may have a restaurant which is 3/4 full, because that you can service.
Yeah.
And I suppose there are just so many tidal forces at work which can knock you off balance. I was thinking the other day about some of the gimmicks that we used to pull to take money from guests. When I first started, we used to charge a fortune for telephones. You had an old-fashioned telephone in your bedroom. People never have them now. But you'd be charging 22 times what the BT charge was for that phone used.
Yeah.
Declaring it as profit. You'd have a fag machine down the corridor, and you'd put a markup on cigarettes, and you'd be thrilled because that was an extra little line of income.
Yes.
And then we tried desperately with Wi-Fi to start charging for that. And of course, today's customer doesn't want to fill in their inside leg measurement, let alone pay for Wi-Fi. They just want to put their phone into the hotel, turn it on, and Wi-Fi automatically finds their machine. So the ability to make money on non-rooms revenue has shrunk inevitably. So you've got to charge the right price for your rooms and try and fill them.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think? I mean, we've done a lot of work at DHM in terms of creating strategies to upsell amenities and room upgrades, and have played around with lots of different various tools. Do you I don't know, do you have a view on the opportunity to upsell those more modern day amenities to guests? Are you finding that guests are able and willing to buy what you're putting in front of them?
We're in the business of delight and surprise. So if we can upsell something that the guest didn't know they needed, and that becomes an essential to their enjoyment of their time with you, that's great. So whether they're taking their wives or someone else's wives away with them, you want them to have a great time and to feel that the experience is special. And I suppose that's the big difference between a functionality which used to pervade the customer base that would go away for a leisure weekend. Very different from the Gen Z customer who loves the experience and the customization or the personalization of what they're doing. But the more you can play on that and determine what their special interests are before they arrive, the more likelihood you are of building a connection and getting lots of repeat custom. So you've got to work harder than you've ever done before. You've got to make it immediate. And you've got to make it fun.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Let me just go back to something you mentioned about your properties in the west of Scotland. You obviously mentioned around attracting and retaining staff. I mean, that's an obvious. If you have a more rural destination, getting the right people into the business is paramount to the success of the business. What do you feel is the industry needs to do more of to attract and retain its talent?
Well, I'm going to be careful what I say now, but I think we should rejoin the EU for the very simple and singular reason that I'm sick to death of not being able to employ the wonderful staff that we used to,
Mm,
who came from Estonia or Poland or Eastern Europe. And purely selfishly, from a retained and skilled and hard-working basis, we've lost our right arm.
yeah.
Now, this has come in generations in the past. It used to be French boys and Italian boys would come over to avoid military service. Then the Channel Islands taught us that Guernsey and Jersey were just going to be an outpost for Portuguese staff. So you always find a way.
Yeah.
At the moment, the answer seems to be to hire Kenyans or South Africans. But we're not relying upon the most obvious labour market that's so close to us. So that's one side of the spectrum. The other side,
Mhm.
of course, how do you make people regard hospitality as a career rather than a holiday job?
Yeah.
And I suppose that's something to do with a sense of self-respect, a sense of it not being upstairs, downstairs, that you're not in service, you are fulfilling a genial role and somewhere you can be a personality.
Mm,
I think there's very few industries where if you have a bit of gumption and a bit of self-start, you can get on quite as quickly to levels of promotion and authority. I think you'd need to serve apprenticeships for much, much longer in other industries, whereas in hotels and restaurants, I think you can get on if you've got the right attitude,
mm,
desire to learn really, really quickly. So by the time you're 30, you could be running a business, turning over many million pounds and being responsible for significant profit delivery.
mm,
I think that's exciting. The last part of this, of course, is the internationalization of it. If you've got a set of knives and a set of chefing skills, you can go work in San Francisco or Sao Paulo or
yeah.
South France. And it's that travelability that I think is such a joy, that the international perspective of skills in the hospitality industry.
Mm. And
So go on.
sorry, after you.
I think there's been a generation where if you didn't become a lawyer or an accountant, you were seen to be not doing something stable or secure.
Hmm.
But as the years have gone by, the employment opportunities for bank managers or members of the armed forces has reduced exponentially.
Mm,
At the same time, the leisure industry has continued to employ more and more people and become more and more part of our daily lives.
mm.
So it's paradoxical that at a time when the least number of new staff seem to be coming into the industry, we probably have more demand for those new staff than we've ever done.
Yeah. So it's paradoxical, isn't it? Because you can't move for chef programs on the telly. The Master Chef is still on, to my knowledge. There's a dozen others that ever since I've been in the industry, when going back about 13, 14 years, when I came out of university, the chef shortage was very prominent then and still is today. What do you think is needed? I mean, could we be doing more as a country, as an industry to really present that career opportunity in hospitality far better than we're doing?
Well, I think we've had an explosion through the Roux brothers and Raymond Blanc,
Hmm.
who spawned Marco Pierre White and Gordon Ramsay. But today's age, you've got characters like Tom Kerridge, who are quite well known, but I don't think we have rock stars. And with great respect, Gordon Ramsay and Marco were both rock stars in their way. So they really shook up the establishment and made cooking sexy.
Mm,
So you need envoys and people who can continue to, I want to be like that. I want to be on stage. I love that theatre.
mm,
But if you're just ticking off the checklist of things that you might need in your life, and you publish the sort of salaries that a top-notch chef in a London hotel could earn, you'd be astonished, because it would be far higher than you'd ever expect.
Mm.
The industry still has a reputation of being poorly paid and antisocial hours.
Yeah.
Well, that pendulum has swung way back now. The 4-day week for chefs, the 10 or 12-hour day, split over 3 or 4 days, rather than the 7-day week or the 5-day week plus time. So it will take time for that penny to drop, but I suppose the last part of the equation is, if you continue to open places that need food and beverage staff, you're inevitably going to find it's difficult to keep pace with that demand. Maybe that's a good thing in the long-term sense, that demand is throttling back in terms of supply, rather, is throttling back in terms of the number of staff who are available. But the check and balance will be that you might want to open a restaurant, but if you can't staff it, you're not going to be able to do so. We're perhaps closer to that turning point than we would think.
Yeah, and it's ultimately infinitely more risky if you're not in, a major city like London or Manchester, and you're actually, relying on great positioning, great marketing to be able to, fill your restaurant. And when costs are so high, that break-even point must be, so much more difficult to achieve and sustain.
But it also varies. I think in Manchester there's enough staff around with a service culture that if you open a business, you can steal or borrow or beg members of staff to come and work with you, who will give that level of experience and savviness to what you're doing. There's never enough, but there's almost enough staff to go around. But there are other cities where there isn't such an embedded hospitality culture, where it's more difficult to recruit. So historically, I've opened a business in Bristol, and I found it very difficult to recruit for that business because the supply there. I think that may have been changed over the years, because Bristol's got much stronger in terms of its food culture.
Yeah.
Edinburgh is just full and buzzing, but I think retention of staff up there is really difficult, simply because demand is so strong.
Okay, well, let's move on to online travel agents and commission and the challenge of direct bookings. If I may, you said this the most eloquently I've ever heard it put many years ago in a conversation when we had coffee at one of your hotels. You said some years ago, Booking.com caught us all sleepwalking and walked into our industry and then sold our customers back to you. I probably completely changed what it was exactly what you said, but that was the premise. And I thought that was just a really well put summary of what has happened in, let's say, the last 10 or 15 years. How do you feel about the OTA sort of relationship now within your own hotels and the industry itself?
I'm probably 50-50 in it, because the competitive businessman in me feels we should be doing everything in our powers to drive business to book direct and not pay an OTA a commission. But the sort of levels of occupancy that hotels right the way across the country now enjoy, which they historically could never have achieved. Probably in the days when I first started in hotels, any occupancy above 65-66% was considered good. These days, anything less than 76% is considered bad. So we've moved the dial 10 percentage points up in terms of occupancy over an extended period of time, largely thanks to the power of Booking.com. We are perilously close to a monopoly, though, with them, because there are plenty of other very small competitors who have their niche, whether that's red letter days or other specialists. But Expedia and Booking.com were the two powerhouses. And typically, for every 3 bookings from an OTA, 2 would come from Booking.com and 1 would come from Expedia.
Yeah.
Other hoteliers may have a different experience, but post-COVID, I've seen that slip to 3 to 1. So for every 4 customers, 3 are coming from Booking.com, and Expedia haven't recovered their penetration and I'm not sure what the reason for that is. And I'm sure they've done a lot of soul searching to find out. the difference is, of course, in the winter, we want every piece of OTA business we can get, and we're happy to pay for it. During the summer, we want to get greedy and find, through allocation, we're saying, we're already full to the OTAs, and try and manage our relationship that way. But if you take out the booking.coms of the world from your inventory too early, you can't half get into trouble. So what do? Do you accept their power and their strength and play up to it and just work with it? Or do you try and fight it? It's a very interesting dilemma, I must say. And I'm not sure there's an answer yet, other than hotels around the world getting together and saying, right, we're going to own booking.com, be given to the public of the world. It should no longer be a limited company. It should be a gift, like the World Wide Web. It should be given to all contributing hotels. It'll never happen, but I can dream.
A lovely thought, though. I'd like to see that one day. That it's just this wonderful, benevolent source where hotels don't need to pay quite so much money to in commission.
Well, I don't know what worthy causes they give all that cash to, but boy, I'm jealous. I think it's absolute genius what they've achieved. The stealth, the craftiness, the intelligence, the speed, the outrageous scale of what they've become. So dominant. It's a fantastic machine.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, what they've, often in my sales meetings, I often cite booking.com as whilst we, a lot of our work is helping hotels to reduce reliance on the likes of booking.com, but let's appreciate what they've been able to achieve. They're the absolute experts at converting hotel guests to book hotels. I had Evie Brockwell on a previous podcast, and she worked at booking.com for a few years, and she went into quite intricate detail about the level of work they would do to just get that 0.1% of extra conversion, and constantly finding ways to just iterate to produce a much more efficient booking experience for them, and obviously the customer as well. To put you on the spot, if I may, I'm not sure how close you are with some of your hotels these days, but what are you finding at the moment to help improve direct bookings within your own properties?
We're using a combination of efforts. We're using the phone more often than we used to as a deliberate tactic, pre-booking. One of the dilemmas with the OTAs is that the name and address and contact details of your client is encrypted. So you don't get to own their full details, and what a bugbear it is asking a client to check in again when they've already registered with their booking. They just want to be able to sign and get out again. So building reasons for the individual guest to talk to you. So using the phone more frequently, coming up with special events and packages which we think are timely. So as a silly example, we wanted to extend the season in one of our Cornish hotels that's right by the coast. So we put on an offer which we featured in the Times with a bit of press coverage, called Storm Watchers Weekends. And we added 10 days to the season, and we were full for those 10 days, which I'm very pleased about. So it can be done, even though there's a property in the North Wales called Lake Vyrnwy, which is by a reservoir.
I think I've been there.
And it rains all the time. So rather than give up, they said, let's put on a brolly break. Come stay with us and get a free umbrella. So I know they sound like gimmicks, but you've got to do something that pricks people's conscience, makes them sit up and say, yeah, I will go there. I think that's worth trying. But the most important thing, and I find this really strange at job interviews, at the end of the interview, the interviewer will say, do you have any questions? And 9 times out of 10, the person will say, no, thank you very much. It's actually a cue to say, I really, really, really want to come and work for you. I don't have a question, but I do want to make a statement. So I'm leaving here, putting my best foot forward. I want a job with you. So asking for the business is something one needs to do pre-arrival, during the stay, and post-arrival. And anything you can do to engage your client base by phone, by email, and we'll come on to social media in just a second, and personalize that experience so you know how grateful they are for them coming to stay with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then earmarking a birthday or an anniversary to give them the excuse to come back.
Mm. We one of the first hotels I was involved in, we always used to ask for birthday, partner's birthday, and anniversary, but never years, always month and day.
Yeah.
And then that way we got a lot more data, and always normally 6 weeks before the partner's birthday, we would send communication saying, here's a special offer to book, a secret break for your partner. And it did really well. I think, that kind of goes into that personalization approach, but also, being a bit sort of innovative, like your Brolly break or your Storm Watchers weekend. It's fantastic.
I think you also need a third party or triangular marketing effort sometimes, which may sound contrary, but if you had an example of a jewelry company or a local store in your town who are launching a new product and you want to encourage people to come and stay with you, see if you can tap into that new phenomena of people queuing around the block to get the latest perfume in Phoenix or wherever, and giving them some added value by hinting that they have negotiated with you a special rate for their customers. You're borrowing their database to become your database and so on. So if you're philanthropic enough to share databases, I think you can have a lot of fun. Yes, there's the on cost of setting it up in the first place, but if you can make it local enough and have enough appeal to the person on the street who suddenly thinks, oh, that's a great idea, I'll try that.
Yeah.
But you've got to be inventive, Adam. You've got to keep fresh. And of course, it's the speed now, because the old line about vegetables get put on the market and you can always sell a vegetable the next day. It may not be quite as fresh, but you've got a second chance. Room night, if you don't sell it that night, it's gone. It's very, very perishable good.
Yeah. I'd not heard that analogy of the vegetable, so I'll be certainly using that and claiming it as my own. So thank you, Robin. You touched on there a lot about email marketing, in terms of being inventive with different breaks and offers. Email marketing, I think, is one of those areas that perhaps often gets overlooked. It's certainly not as sexy as some of the new and available tools in a marketer's toolbox. Do you still see email marketing playing a sort of a significant factor in your businesses and going forward?
Yes, I do, but you've got such simple rules about the break in the screen as to how far people will read the headline before they go into the text. The opening ratio is quite low for most emails unless you can get their attention quickly. So it bleeds into automatically using Facebook and Instagram and possibly TikTok, depending on the demographic broadcast your wares. And I'm finding people will come to us through Instagram and say, I'd like to book a table for 4, please. We're not a booking platform, but we should be. And some people, the creative types, do tend to live in an Instagram world.
Yeah.
So if you can get that to monetize and you can create a shopping channel through Facebook for a certain demographic, Instagram for another, then good luck to you. Clearly what seems to work, you can fill up with static imageries, but that short clip that engages and intrigues, that's about 15 seconds long, seems to capture the zeitgeist. And you can, I'm a fan of soft drinks, and I'm a complete tart when it comes to shopping through Instagram, buying these ludicrous drinks to try at home, with a strike rate of about half in terms of those that are acceptable and those that taste dreadful. So, so I've seen the drinks industry wake up to how to retail to home delivery. Quite amusing.
I must say, I have found myself more often than I care to admit having purchased something from Instagram because the video was exceptional. It's something I had no idea that I needed, but felt that it struck a chord.
Yeah.
And the latest one was Impossible. They don't seem to advertise, but it's fantastic non-alcoholic beer, which is nice on occasion at home. So I ended up spending 50 quid on a crate. It was great, but it clearly works in terms of getting in front of people.
Well, I wasn't that keen on the lager, but I like their pale ale.
Oh, you've had it as well, have you?
Yeah, I've done it. I spent 50 quid as well, and I think, why the hell did I do that? That's bonkers. But they just touched a nerve.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you get really skilled marketing, it is interesting how certain brands can be transformed according to. If you look at the old sales of the yogurt business, Yo Valley, and then they hired, I think they're called the Big Fish or something like that, some super Uber agency to do their design and packaging.
Yeah.
And the sales just went through the roof as soon as they captured the look and the feel and the messaging they wanted to get across.
Mm.
And I think that's the key thing with hotels is, do you bombard the client with pictures of exotic looking models in impossibly tight dresses doing something seductive with the impossibly handsome man? Or do you show someone's big toe leaning out of the bath with gone fishing wrapped around their toe? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's got to be funny. It's got to be warm, and it's got to be memorable. And I think an awful lot of hoteliers are frightened of it and are yet to find that creative agency that will deal in sufficiently small numbers to help inspire and mentor. But I'm sure there's a fantastic cause there. If someone, and perhaps it's you, Adam, I don't know, but maybe you're already doing some of that. But I certainly think there's a big market for helping people to come up with rich and imaginative marketing.
Yeah, I think we've just done a model shoot at one of our clients, which we sourced the models ourselves, and we were very careful not to make the models the focal point. I think that's the risk. What we wanted to achieve was that somewhere in between what you just said. It's not necessarily that beautiful couple going for dinner, and it's not quite. There's a little bit more than just the toe out the bath, but fundamentally putting the product at front and center. Obviously, if the product's good enough, then that's I think where you get the big wins. But also, I think there's something meaningful in presenting who comes to stay here. Very often with certainly sort of more rural country house hotels, there is a perception and often the reality at times that the clientele is of a more mature disposition, shall we say, and often the hotel's objective is we want those 30 and 40-year-olds coming from London for the weekend, that because we're only a couple of hours away. So I think it's more about who do we want to be, who do we offer the best experience for, and then getting those models in that fit the bill.
Age appropriate models.
Yes, exactly. That you've just succinctly put in 3 words what I've tried to say in about 3 minutes. So thank you, Robin. Okay, well let's finish on some quick fire questions, if I may, Robin. What do you see as the top 3 metrics that you would look at weekly or even daily in your business?
I look at the occupancy and the room rate achieved, and I'm sorry, this is a slightly more complicated answer.
No, not at all.
Looking at average room rate, I'm looking at TRevPAR and RevPAR. So that's a daily essential. I look at complaints to see what's performing, and then on a daily basis, I will pick a general manager in the group and ring him up for a chat.
Nice.
For no reason, no agenda, just to see how to catch him off guard.
Yeah. There must be the fear of God when somebody says Robin's on the phone.
Well, I hope not. Or who the are you? Sorry, I'll edit that out.
No, we're good. Oh, I love that. Okay, so you're sort of keeping that finger on the pulse in the businesses, as it were, to just sort of keep.
Can't get around to every hotel, but a phone call. We as a culture so rarely use the phone these days, and I'm making a conscious effort to use it much more. I think it's a legacy of COVID that people just relied upon what we're doing now, which is a Zoom or Teams call. And we've lost that ability to socialize quite as much as we used to face to face. But certainly the phone usage as a phone has gone down hugely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next one. If you could magically increase either rate, occupancy, or direct bookings significantly, what would you choose?
Rate.
And why?
This assumes a perfect world where everybody's paid infinitely more money than they currently are and are completely careless about how much cash they spend in a super hotel experience. So that's my premise. The logic is that we have got the turnover to reinvest in the business and make sure the product remains fresh and zingy.
Great. And what is the most important thing in your view about being a successful hotelier?
Caring about the people. And by that, I mean caring for your staff, caring about the experience that the guest has, taking an interest in their lives without being overbearing or pompous about it all. But I think the personal contact is something that I enjoyed and celebrated and became quite good at when I was a general manager. That's a long time ago now, of course. But I still think I guess when we pop our clogs, Adam, there'll be memories of people, but the memories will be based on how you touch that person's life. And if you don't make an attempt to ask questions or find out about people, you're never going to have a chance to influence them. So I think just getting to know people and taking an interest in them is the most important thing.
Robin, it's been a pleasure, as it always is, speaking. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for being my guest on the podcast.
A pleasure. Very good to talk to you again, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you.